Hey everybody, this is Mike with Free Roaming Hiker, and in this video I'm going to give you 10 tips for newbie hikers. If you're wanting to get into hiking, if you've seen how much fun it looks, or you're just wanting to find a new hobby to stay in shape or just get outside more, here are 10 tips that are vital to know before you start getting more ambitious and to kind of get you going in the right direction to start hiking. So number one is start small. Hiking is just like any other exercise and it requires muscles that need to be built up. And if you're new to hiking, those muscles need to be worked out and conditioned properly. So going on something like a 10-mile hike could be very dangerous or even fatal. So you don't want to jump in too hard right away. You want to start small and start understanding your body and letting it build up those muscles. So assuming you're hiking regularly for a few weeks, you want to start with something like some easy 3 to 5 mile hikes. And as those start to get easier and easier, then you can start to challenge yourself with a little bit longer hikes because your body's a little bit more acclimated to walking that kind of a distance over sometimes uneven terrain, especially easy hikes. They're not necessarily flat always. It's nice when they are, but sometimes they do have a little bit of elevation change, which subtly works out muscles that you don't realize are being worked out. But it's important not to be over ambitious, especially early on, and that leads into point number two, which is to know your limits. Now, experienced hikers know not to push themselves farther or harder than their body can really commit to. That doesn't mean not challenging yourself to do something a little bit longer or a little bit harder. What that means is that if you're used to doing 7 or 8 miles a day, it's not a good idea to go jump out and try a 20-mile day just because you have a big group of friends that are doing that. That's going to cause a lot of problems and not going to end well. Knowing your limits is what allows you to push yourself a little bit more and do those harder hikes, but at more of an incremental pace rather than trying to go too far and too hard all at once. Number three is to get a water filter and carry it with you. Nothing weighs heavier in your pack than water, assuming you've packed it properly and you haven't brought a lot of extra things that you don't need. But water will weigh you down more than any other thing that you need in your backpack. So if there's water on the trail you're going on, it's a lot easier to just carry 1 or 2 liters and refill along the way rather than trying to double your load and just weighing yourself down with lots of water that could potentially just slow you down too much and exert yourself before you even really get going. By having a lighter load, it makes for much easier hiking and a much more enjoyable day. Which also leads into number four, which is to be prepared. Just like you want to know where you're going and what to expect, you also want to know if there's water on the trail. Is it even worth bringing that water filter? Do you need to load up on water because maybe you're doing a desert hike in the Southwest where water's scarce, or maybe you're doing a hike in the mountains where water's plentiful and you only need 1 liter? It helps to know those things, so it's always important to look into how much water is available, if any. Now, even if you are in the Southwest, you're in the Northeast, every hike is different. Just because you're in a certain region doesn't mean there is or isn't going to be water. So it helps to know specifically about that hike. And you want to look into it. And a lot of times you can get information from visitor centers, ranger offices, Forest Service offices, things like that. They're always happy to help hikers because they would much rather you be prepared than not prepared. So read over the route and know what to expect. Number five is double check your info. An app like All Trails is great for discovering new trails, but do not rely on that as your only source of information. A lot of information on that app is not good, and it's led to people getting lost, and it's led to unexpected hazards that weren't documented on the hike. And it's really important that you find some other alternative of information, whether it's a guidebook, whether it's, as we just mentioned, going into a visitor center or a Forest Service office to ask them about the trail. It's vital that you understand the trail itself and not look to potentially unverified information as your only source of information. Number six is go with somebody else. At least when you're starting out, it's best to have somebody with you. That way, if something potentially goes wrong, there's somebody else there that you can turn to. You can use your combined wisdom to find a way out or figure out what went wrong. Also, potentially learn some techniques and just some other hiking advice from. It's also a good idea to see if there's any hiking groups in your area. A lot of places, especially larger cities, have hiking groups. They're active. They're always exploring the area, finding new trails. That's a great way to get into hiking because you've got typically an experienced leader. They know what they're doing and they're willing to be responsible for a group of people that may or may not be experienced. So there's definitely a level of accountability there that they're willing to accept, which would usually make them a pretty reliable leader. And nobody's going to organize a hike without knowing something about it. So these are good people that might be good resources to ask them how they got started and what they were looking for and things like that, just to kind of pick their brain a little bit. Number 7 is to supply properly. And we've already talked about water, but this also includes things like snacks and even extra layers of clothing. You want to have a meal relatively recently to starting your hike, because the last thing you want to do is hike on a hungry stomach and then try to replenish that as you're going. That will never work out well, and it's going to leave you pretty miserable throughout the bulk of your hike. So snacks are a great way to just feed your hunger as it comes, but you want to make sure you have a meal prior. That way you have something substantial in your system and you're not really trying to fill up an empty stomach. With clothing, it should be comfortable. If you're wearing short sleeve, especially in the Western US, you want to make sure you're using sunscreen as well. Now, one way people avoid sunscreen, because maybe they're doing a longer hike, they don't want the extra weight of sunscreen or to reapply it, you can also wear long sleeves. You can wear lightweight top layers and lightweight pants, and that kind of keeps your body from too much sun exposure. Likewise, a full-brimmed hat will keep your head and your face safe as well. And that way you're carrying a little bit less weight, and it's one less thing to worry about. Number 8, and one that I preach almost always, is to hydrate before you get started. What I do is I always have a liter of water that I'm drinking roughly 60 to 30 minutes before starting a hike. I want to have a liter of water in my body ready to go, because that starts you out hydrated, your muscles are ready to go, your body is, ready for exertion, and you just feel a lot better and a lot more willing to move your body if it's hydrated. There have been times where I've started a hike where I wasn't hydrated, and it's universal. It's not just me. Everybody will just feel sluggish and like you don't want to move. Like even the most modest uphill climb is going to feel like you're climbing up a 14,000-foot mountain. It's essential that you hydrate to get your body ready to start moving. Likewise, the last thing you want to do is to try to rehydrate as you're on the trail. It usually just doesn't work out because you're exerting energy, especially if it's warm, you're going to be sweating. Trying to rehydrate while you're on the trail isn't going to work. So you want to start off hydrated, and you just want to maintain that hydration as you're hiking, which is much easier to do than trying to hydrate from being dehydrated. Number 9 is carry a physical map and know how to read it. And yes, there are plenty of apps that have maps on them. They're free, which makes them even more enticing sometimes. But the problem is you're relying on a device that could fail you. It's okay to use those as maps and to kind of see where you're going if you're comfortable with your phone and you really want to rely on that. But in the event that your phone just didn't charge as much as you thought, or you wind up using more phone battery than you expected, your phone will eventually die. And it's essential that you have a map that can tell you where you're going. And so even if you don't want to use it as your primary map, you'd rather use the phone, that's totally fine, but have that backup just in case. They don't weigh a lot. They're definitely worth having, and they are essential to making sure you don't get lost in the backcountry. In a nutshell, it's just considered bad etiquette to rely on your cell phone only, because there are so many things that could go wrong with a digital map. I love tracking my map. I love looking at maps, and I'm a big map nerd, whether it's digital or physical. But in the event that you're going, especially if you're going somewhere new, it's longer, you really want to have a physical map just in case anything goes wrong. And it's really important to know how to read it as well. Number 10 is check the weather. What kind of day is it going to be? Is it going to be a blue sky day? Are there storms rolling in the afternoon? Is there a chance of snow? These are things that you really want to know before going out ahead of time, not just because you'll know what to expect, but also because you want to have the right layers. Do you need a rain jacket? Do you need a puffy jacket? These are all things that you want to have in your backpack ready to go if it's necessary. If it's starting out raining, is it going to clear up? Knowing these kinds of things will just make sure you have a much happier and enjoyable hike. And maybe a little type 2 fun, but in hindsight, at least if you're prepared, it'll be much more fun than just misery. So those are my 10 tips for newbie hikers. If you have any that I might have missed, or you want to shout out some extras, leave them down in the comments below. If you have any other questions, leave them there as well. Please like and subscribe for more content like this. And thanks for watching, and happy trails.